Happy Wednesday, FreightWaves Now edition style. We are here with Chief Meteorologist Nick Austin talking to us about the disruptions in weather happening today. And Dean Croak is telling us about some new indexes we've got going on where we can track hours of service utilization, what is happening with the war on detention, and what's happening with capacity. We can track and trace these things and deep dive. So without further ado, let's begin doing that here in beautiful sunny Chattanooga.
But it's a great day.
Yeah, it is here. What's going on around here?
Well, Chad, I mean, most of the country is actually pretty quiet as far as lack of rain or snow falling today and tonight. There's not much happening. Look how much of the country is actually quite dry. Now, there's still flooding problems in the Midwest. No rain out there today, but eastern Nebraska, parts of western Iowa, even other areas along the Missouri from the state of Missouri even up to South Dakota. Yes, there's still going to be flooding all week. Not a lot of major flooding, but along the Missouri, a lot of locations, the rain gauge is still staying above flood stage, possibly through tomorrow and maybe even into the weekend, with some rain coming, not today, but tomorrow, and more snow melt. But where the snow's actually falling today...
Don't tell me. Donner Pass? The Sierras?
That's right. Donner Pass, Carson Pass, most of the other mountain passes in the Sierra Nevada, in eastern California, right near the Nevada line. So, and you know, they've gotten so much snow this year, especially last month in February. A lot of the ski resorts in the Sierra Nevada had record snowfall for February. And we're seeing on the road conditions too that there could be possible closures on I-80, maybe even a few areas of Interstate 5 north of Redding, where some heavy, at least enough snow might fall to cause problems there in Northern California.
Seeing some issues there with road
on the road conditions. Anytime you see, especially the pink come up, which means potential icy conditions, that's going to be bad. And the purple, if any roads pop up in purple, that means potential closures. And so that really could be an issue again across the Sierra Nevada for the rest of today, as well as tonight. It'll calm down a bit tonight, but there'll still be snow showers out there. And we're talking totals. Some of these areas in the Sierra Nevada, some spots already got several inches of snow earlier this week.
Okay.
So when you add it all together for the week so far, once the storm's even gone, we're talking about some parts of Sierra Nevada getting 2 to maybe 3 feet of snowfall. And even a lot of the lower slopes maybe getting 5 to 10 inches. And a lot of heavy rain in the foothills and in the Central Valley, which includes Sacramento and areas like that. So, yes, that's the story today. The main active weather area is going to be out in eastern California and the Lake Tahoe area as well, and over towards Reno.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Thanks for that update. So, yes, there is maybe a brief reprieve nationwide speaking, and of course, in the Sierras, the freight show must go on. But speaking of the freight show going on, Dean Croak talking to us about hours of service. Welcome aboard, Dean.
Hey, Chad.
Good to have you back.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Thanks.
Wanted to talk a little bit about some of the indexes we've got today. What we've noticed is that as volumes have sort of rumbled along in March, they're about 3.9% down year over year, which is kind of interesting. They're at 10,041 today on our OTVI index. But what we've noticed is something really interesting, and that is that even though volumes kind of go up in March, the amount of wait time that we calculate from ELD devices, the amount of wait time that shippers are keeping carriers within their distribution center or loading unloading dock has increased about 40% since last year, around here at the low point. So right now it's up around 173 minutes on average every time a trucker goes into an area to load or unload. And that's a disproportionate amount of time considering how long it takes to unload and load. The problem now, though, is that with ELDs, every minute that you spend on a loading dock, loading or unloading, comes off your available hours to drive each week. So if you're sitting on a loading dock waiting and you're not being paid, and you're only paid to run miles, it becomes a really serious issue. And there's a great case in point. So as capacity's kind of loosened, we've found shippers sort of reverting back to their normal behaviours of keeping drivers longer.
Boy, has the situation changed just looking at that. Interesting, this line here on weight. When it was the capacity crunch in March last year, we were talking about shippers of choice and the pendulum swinging and how they were trying to and look at, wow.
Wait times have gone up. So this is the great part about ELDs, because they actually allow us now to calculate every minute that a driver is spending on a loading dock. And that's where our war on detention comes into play, in particular in a market like Shreveport today that I just want to focus on and talk a little bit about what's happening there. We see in Shreveport in Louisiana, it's a head haul index. So on the head haul index, it means that it's more freight's going out than coming in. It's about a 15 on the head haul index, which means it's a good market for a carrier to run into. What I want to show you here is the outbound tender volume index, which is up about 14% in the month of March. March this time last year, volume increased about 22% in the month of March. So the rate of increase is less. And when you look at the volumes year over year, if you compare the volumes of this March to last March, freight volumes in this market are down about 22%, which is kind of the same for a lot of markets, Chad, because freight volumes are down generally overall. There is some softening in the freight market. What I wanted to show you here is that as volumes have gone up, it's kind of interesting that the medium length of haul, MTRI,
in Shreveport,
is the green line.
Yes. And
so on the far right, you can see the MTRI index is at about 10.31%. So carriers have a reasonable amount of choices. They're rejecting 10.31% of the loads that are tendered into the market. MTRI represents the 250 to 450 mile hauls.
Mid-haul.
So what's fascinating with the Shreveport market today is the sort of average for all tender rejections is down in the 4% range. So mid-haul, 250 to 450 mile, is about 3 times higher. So why are carriers rejecting mid-haul loads three times more? Well, the answer lies in the weight index, because the weight index here has grown about 72% year over year. So it means shippers are detaining trucks in Shreveport about 4 hours and 40 minutes every time they load and unload.
We've been talking this whole week, Dean. We've been talking a little bit about, we've been talking about the war on detention. We've been talking about how the reason that nobody likes it is because there are no winners. It's not like spot and contracted rates where maybe somebody gets out of it and hey, for a little while they might kind of maximize their mark. This, like, everyone's the loser. The driver's not getting paid. The carrier's costs are going up. In the end, isn't that translated to us when freights go up?
Eventually, but because we've got such a loose market in terms of capacity, there's more trucks than freight. Right now, there isn't any upward pressure on freight rates. There's more downward pressure on freight rates as we sit. But what's interesting about the Shreveport market is this. The tender rejections for the medium length of haul are elevated. And if you think about the average wait time is 4 hours and 40 minutes. So let's think now to ELDs where you've got a window of 11 hours to drive. Now, if I spend 4 hours and 40 minutes average on a loading dock, how many hours have I got left to run?
Not enough to get back home.
So once the length of haul gets about 300 miles out of Shreveport, I start to run out of hours, which is why carriers are rejecting those loads in that 250 to 450 range, because they can't deliver them same day, because ELDs are capturing, on average, they spend 4.5 hours sitting on a loading dock waiting to load and unload. So it's interesting to see. This is where the pressure comes back on shippers, because carriers won't be able to deliver that freight that normally they could same day. If there's pressure to get them off docks quicker, then they can actually move that freight. And that's how carriers exhibit that frustration, by rejecting a higher percentage of the loads on that length of haul.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot if you haven't looked at this, but do we have any data on tweener freight or how those rejections might be?
In today's market in Shreveport, it was only the mid-haul. All the others were quite depressed.
Oh, okay.
So it was only the
so it's that little window.
It was kind of Dallas, Memphis, New Orleans market where carriers were saying, you know what, I can't do a load the same day and be within my 11 hours on my driving hours on the ELD.
Fascinating. Yeah. Dean, we've got a couple of really cool new indexes, that help us battle this war on detention. You want to tell us about them?
I do. I mean, the great part about ELDs is now you've got an electronic fingerprint of every time a truck hits a loading dock. and you can calculate how many minutes the truck is actually there. And one of the things we've done is we've broken out wait time by industry classification, because not all shippers are equal. Some commodities take longer to load and unload, like frozen freight in Fresno takes a long time to unload and load, where they have the highest wait time. But when we break wait time down by the commodity that the trailer hauls, we see a big variation. And what we can see here is the blue line represents food. Food is about 183 minutes. It's a little bit more than the industry average. Why is that? Food generally comes off a production line. Truckers tell me that whenever they have to carry food, they've got to back onto a dock. They're generally kept waiting until the food comes off the production line for just-in-time transit. Whereas if you look at electrical goods, which is the highest, up around 214, this is 194 here now. What you can see is that electrical, because of the security concerns around high-value commodities, it takes longer. There's more security, they're more fragile, they're more delicate, takes longer to unload and load. Some of it's not palletized, so it's hand unload, live load. So there's a little bit of difference between the commodities. I've just shown you a couple here, Chad. We've got 18 new indices around weight, so you could look at you could look at oil, all sorts of different industries, and figure out the detention time by the type of commodity the trailer hauls.
In defense of shippers, is there anything that I'm seeing? So there's all these good reasons you're giving for why they're detaining drivers. What could they be doing to improve this? And in fact, they do improve these things at time when capacity is tight.
Right. So a couple of things shippers can do. We talk about the Shipper of Choice program, where communication is a really big part of it. Communicating with the carrier, communicating with the driver communicating with the shipper. A lot of drivers don't turn up on time with their scheduled appointment. So it's a two-way street here. But for the most part, with excess capacity right now, even when a driver turns up on time, they do spend a lot of time on a loading dock. So there's no real pressure on the shippers right now across the board to actually address this because of the overcapacity issue. I think communication is a really big part of it. Willingness is another, wanting to make sure that you keep that capacity when it gets busy again, because it's going to get busy in the next couple of months and you will need trucks. So I wouldn't be lulled into this false sense of security right now where I can keep a truck on a loading dock as long as I want because I can always find another truck. That won't always be the case. Right, I want to just show you another couple of tickers we've got now on the weight. After we go through the weight, I want to show you now the derivative of the ELDs, which shows you now the number of hours drivers are driving on line 3 of their logbook. Line 3 represents on-duty driving, and they average 6.79 hours. What you can see here is the average number of hours truckers drive across the country. You can see 4th of July, hours drop. You can see Labor Day, you can see Thanksgiving, volumes drop right off around Christmas time. Volume, this is a really interesting thing. As volumes have kind of been on this roller coaster ride the first quarter of this year, you can kind of see this same roller coaster ride with the number of hours drivers are driving. So now that we've got ELDs, we've actually got a really good proxy for capacity in the market, and it kind of tracks towards volume. It's very interesting. We didn't have this with paper logs. This is a really interesting new phenomenon. What I wanted to show you now is how this breaks out based on the length of haul. And what we've done is we've broken this out by the short haul guys and girls, the regional and the over the road. So you can see here the bottom line here in the purple colour. This is the local drivers. These are drivers that could be the dray operators hauling off ramps, delivering containers. They could be guys delivering sand and loam. Typically they're bumping docks a lot more often. There may be hourly pay type drivers, so detention time's not a big issue. But they kind of average on average about 4.59 hours of their maximum 11. A lot of these drivers though, Chad, probably 12-hour shift guys. They work 5 days a week, 12 hours a day. They bump up on their 60-hour limit in 5 days. They're a little bit different to the regional and over-the-road guys who are probably typically working 6 days on, 1 off.
They're starting and stopping a lot.
Mostly bumping docks all day.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's
why it's lower.
Okay.
Right. But when we separate out regional drivers, which could be guys in day cabs that are running in that sort of up to 450-mile range, maybe they're sleeping in their truck every other night. Sort of doing out and back distribution type work for e-commerce is a good example. They run about 7.07 hours of their maximum 11. And when you look at the over the road guys that typically run 48 states and the longer distance ones, sleeping in their truck every night, maybe home 1 day for every 7 out. They might be out 2 or 3 weeks at a time and then come home for 2 or 3 days off. They typically are running 7.59 hours on average every day. So that's kind of gives you a sense of the spread. These are the new tickers. You can look at those now in LHOS, RHOS 11.
Yeah, it's very straightforward, really cool stuff. Thank you, Dean. Fantastic. You know, we can't claim to necessarily solve the industry's problems, but we can shine a light on them. I think that's our role in the business media, is to point these things out and say, hey, we would like to see the war on detention. We are declaring the war on detention, and we would like to see the wait times go down. It's better for everybody. Let's communicate and let's have some willingness to do that. So thank you to our chiefs. We had 2 great cooks in the kitchen today. Thank you to them for what they're bringing to us, and we're bringing it to you each and every day. What is happening right now on FreightWaves Now? So check us out, share the love on social media, and check us out on FreightWaves.com. And we will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And in the meantime, don't worry, be happy.